Do you even know where the King James Version of the Bible came from? Lots of people think that there's something particularly special about it. It must have been really, really important, or it must have been like the first or the best or something like that for it to be so common today. But none of those things are even remotely true. The King James Bible is certainly an important one, and I think historically it probably has the biggest impact on English-speaking Christians today, but that's kind of a collection of historical accidents that leads to it. King James himself was barely involved in the creation of that Bible. Certainly he authorized it and he wrote a bunch of details about what should happen within the translation of that Bible, but the bulk of those things really just say, start with previous versions that exist, copy them mostly word for word, and then just change the odd thing. Particularly, he was very interested in reducing the anti-monarchic wording, the stuff that said rulers and monarchs can be really problematic. In fact, you'll see if you look at the King James Version and other translations, the word tyrant doesn't exist in the King James, although it does exist other places. That name is almost always labeled after kings who are not behaving the way that God would like them to behave. Most of the words of the King James Bible came from something called the Bishop's Bible that was very popular at the time and had more of an anti-monarchic sentiment to it. And a lot of the Bishop's Bible was also drawn from Tyndale's Bible. And as we dig into the history, we find out that Tyndale was one of the first people to do a lot of translation of the Bible into English because in his time it was still illegal to read it in anything other than Latin. But when the King James Version first was published, it was already outdated. It comes from a conservative rewriting of a conservative translation from 100 years before. Even the language and the wording, which feels quite old and sometimes a little bit special to us because it sounds like Shakespeare, was old and out of date even at first printing. And so because of that, it was not particularly popular, even though it was the authorized version from King James himself. Many Anglican churches continued to use the Bishop's Bible that was the more popular and already existed in print at the time. And it wasn't until about 50 years after the King James Bible first came out that it started to become really popular, and that was only because the Bishop's Bible went out of print. And that takes us into the late 1600s, and it was still really just a Bible that resided on the pulpits of churches in England. It wasn't until the mid to late 1800s that it started to make its way throughout England and Europe, and especially the United States, because of different Bible societies that were working hard to put it in the hands of more and more people. There's a tiny slice about the King James Bible. We're going to come back to this later. I love you all. Bye for now.